people are starting to rank safeties, and people never give Jimmie Ward his due. I mean, I was in this camp before until you and Robert Saleh. Not even Robert Saleh in press conference. I would ask him, like, can you please explain this to me, Robert? Because I don't freaking get it. And he would lay it out. I'm like, all right, that's a good point. He's a man coverage, not getting thrown to. He's doing his job. Fair, fair, fair. So given that we've all had this enlightenment, this age of enlightenment with Jimmie Ward, and a lot of people haven't, can you please set the record straight on where he ranks and where he's getting ranked?
So, like, I think the age of enlightenment has finally come for the Niners fan base. Wow.
Yes.
6 years into the guy's career, we finally decided that he's a good football player.
Well, he switched positions 8 times, and he was hurt a few times. True. So give us I'm not a fan, but give people some, True. It took him some time.
But what I will say, for a fan base that believes unequivocally in what their coaches say,
true.
Vic Fangio and that coaching staff loved him. Eric Mangini and that defensive coaching staff loved Jimmie Ward. Jim O'Neill and Chip Kelly loved Jimmie Ward. Kyle Shanahan, Robert Saleh loved Jimmie Ward. So how many players go through 4 regimes where all coaching staffs, when you ask about Jimmie Ward, is I love the player. I love the player. So versatile, so tough.
And
I love the football player.
Which you can see why.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So to me, I was like, it's confusing because, like, they'll believe, like, they'll believe when, Kyle Shanahan says that, Jalen Hurd is looking good, but they won't believe when Kyle Shanahan says, no, Jimmie Ward is one of the best football players on our team. I would wear a Jimmie Ward jersey if I could. So that was always confusing to me. But now this fan base is rounded out towards this idea that he's a hell of a football player.
Real quick, to be fair, it's just that his box score isn't the most impressive. Like, if you haven't watched a ton of Jimmie Ward tape and you just look at his box score, you're like, well, the picks aren't there. I mean, he's missed some time, but that's the whole reason you got to watch the tape.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then now we're getting to a point where the other argument against him was health, but he's had 2 pretty healthy seasons, right? 14 and 14 games. And we're reaching a point where I think it's time that he starts to get his national consensus. I actually think his partner should get his national consensus too, but his partner hasn't been unhealthy in Jaquiski Tartt. So I can understand it. And I'm seeing these national rankings come out. PFF has been doing rankings constantly. Respect to PFF, their rankings have been terrible. I don't know what logic they're using to make their rankings, but their rankings have been terrible.
PFF does some things well. Rankings aren't one of them.
Yeah, and Sam Monson did some safety rankings, and he had Jimmie Ward 19th. To me, that's stunning because there's not 18 safeties in the NFL better than Jimmie Ward. He had Jimmie Ward ranked as the 19th best safety in the NFL, and he had guys like Darnell Savage above him. That's where I was like, huh? He had Adrian Amos above him. Adrian Amos is a really consistent, solid player. He is not better than Jimmie Ward. There were a few others. Like, for example, the criteria. Let me go on just a little side rant away from Jimmie Ward because I want to just show the flaws in the criteria of this ranking, okay? In that particular ranking, Sam Monson wrote 2 paragraphs. His number 1 safety was Justin Simmons of the Denver Broncos. He said he's the only PFF graded out safety to have 2 90-plus seasons in a row. I'm not discrediting Justin Simmons because he's a hell of a football player, but he also plays in the most safety-friendly scheme in the NFL with Vic Fangio. We saw what he did for Deshaun Goldson and Dante Whitner, but here's the funny thing. Sam Monson was able to see this nuance because number 24, he had ranked Eddie Jackson, who he said had a 90-plus rated, who had a PFF graded 90 season with Vic Fangio, so the same 90 grade that Justin Simmons has gotten the last 2 years, but has really fallen off since Vic Fangio left. Well, genius, the answer is right there in front of you. Maybe both are good safeties. One is playing with Vic Fangio currently. One was playing with Vic Fangio before. Maybe one is not the number 1 safety and the other one's not the number 24th safety.
That's the saltiest I've ever heard. He said, well, genius. I was, woo! Those fighting words. I mean, words.
The inability to, because if you can logically I understand if somebody wasn't logically understanding that. He wrote the exact right answer in either of those paragraphs, and he has one ranked 1, one ranked 24. Logically, there's no conclusion. Right. There's no conclusion. So, yes, Justin Simmons' production is inflated because he plays with Vic Fangio. Yes, Deshaun Goldson's production was inflated because he played with Vic Fangio. Yes, Dante Whitner. Right. And it's not that these aren't great players. They are all good players. Right. They just play in a great scheme that if Jimmie Ward played in that scheme as a free safety, he could have 4 picks and,
No doubt.
3 forced fumbles, and it would look very different. So
But he was
that's
a
the first
nickel
thing.
under
But
Fangio for sure.
right. And then here's what really put me over the top, right? And Fangio asked so much of his nickel. That's why he always has a highly paid nickel. They paid Bryce Callahan a ton of money because he asked his nickel to guard in man coverage a lot. And that's what Jimmie Ward had to do as a rookie. But here's what really put me on over the top. Today, Doug Farr for USA Today had a list where he ranked his top 11 safeties in the NFL, okay? Darnell Savage is at 3 on that list. I'll post a couple of film clips kind of being a little salty about why Darnell Savage shouldn't be ranked there. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Hopefully, at that point, I regain my poise and I'm like, okay, this is not the best decision. But at this moment, I have a couple lined up and a couple more Jimmie Ward ones lined up to post. And he had 10 honorable mentions, and Jimmie Ward wasn't mentioned in any of the 10 honorable mentions. So he's telling you that there's 20 safeties in the NFL better than Jimmie Ward. To me, that's crazy. And the thing with Ward, and the reason he is a top 10 safety in the NFL, is I hate to keep beating the dead horse, but it comes back to the one thing that he does better than every safety in the NFL. It's man coverage. Like, we can talk about, like, I think I've broken down enough times where people are bored of hearing about it, why the box score numbers don't look the exact same, or what he does really well in other areas of his game, how he's so consistent and good at every single thing. But I think the one thing that separates him in the aspect of his game that's truly special is the man coverage. I mean, Croc had a mini thread where he showed him covering Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman. He showed him, both of those clips from Mecole Hardman.
Woods.
I posted the one with him covering Robert Woods. He showed Gerald Everett, Cooper Kupp, Jared Cook. The point is that this guy deletes people in man coverage.
Yep.
You don't get thrown the ball if you're deleting people in man coverage. This guy is unbelievable. I think that when you add the fact that he's this special man coverage free safety, he never gets beat over the top when he plays in the post. He's an excellent tackler. He has solid range. He's a very good athlete, and he's been durable the last 2 years. I think at this point, we need to start giving him his national due as a top 10 safety. And I think that as a 49ers community, we are actually to blame as to why he's not getting his national due, because it takes these people getting their local due before they get their national due. We were screaming Fred Warner's the top 5'6" linebacker in the NFL in 2019. He played about the same in 2019 as he played in 2020. He improved, obviously, but he didn't improve from the national media observing him as a top 10 to 12 linebacker to the best linebacker in the NFL. There were just more eyes on him because we kept screaming, no, you don't understand. This guy's already elite. And then they took them a year to see that he was elite. And that's where with Ward, I think that it was our fault as a community that we weren't screaming enough that no, this guy was fantastic in 2019 because he could have been perceived the same way Warner was in 2020.
Okay, real quick, we need to move on and take some questions. But before we move on, where would you rank him? How many safeties would you say are clearly ranked ahead of Jimmie Ward right now?
Budda Baker. That's one. I'd probably put Justin Simmons. He's a really good player, even though they have a scheme that helps him out. John Johnson, who just got signed by the Browns, I think he's a guy that's in that same conversation. Those would be the 3. I think there's a couple of guys I'm missing out on. I don't think Jesse Bates is as consistent in the run game as Jimmie Ward, and I don't think he can delete people in man coverage the same way Jimmie Ward does, so I wouldn't put Jesse Bates above. Jamal Adams, really, really great player, not as great in space, so they're totally different skill sets. Hard for me to compare. Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think that Minkah Fitzpatrick is really, really good. I think the one thing that kind of goes to his advantage compared to Jimmie Ward is that because they traded a first-round pick for him, I think schematically they do a lot of things to help Minkah Fitzpatrick in terms of getting him around the football. Pittsburgh's a very aggressive defense, but the one thing they do with Minkah Fitzpatrick when they play him as a single high safety is they let him play a lot of robber, which is what Jimmie Ward said he is not allowed to. He doesn't play a lot of. And what robber basically the entire notion of what a robber safety is, it's basically you're going to pick off backside crossers. You're going to basically be you're literally robbing the backside. You're on the backside and you're robbing the front side concept. So if there's a crosser coming across and you're a single high safety, you're going to jump the crosser. And Minkah Fitzpatrick, because of that, has gotten quite a few interceptions. That's why he always seems to get thrown the football, because schematically the Steelers put him right there near it. Now, he has great instincts, great hands, but I personally wouldn't say he's definitively better than Ward. So I think it's those three for sure.
Okay.
I think everybody else you can make a conversation, honestly, if I'm talking objectively. Now, I haven't watched every safety in the NFL, but I think Baker, Simmons, and John Johnson would be the only three that I would say, okay, I'd be
So
comfortable.
it's fair to call him top
taking
5.
them, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Tyrann Mathieu, to me, is the same exact player.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Matt says the NHL background drives me nuts. Where is their prior knowledge of on-field conditioning work coming from a sport played on ice? NHL is a different world. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's an experiment that hasn't worked out so far. If the Niners are serious about changing this issue, they would look at this. I mean, my dad, he went on last week and told me that Bill Walsh once fired, or allegedly fired, the entire custodial staff because the pictures were a little askew in the hallway.
No way.
People don't mess around, man. There's a high standard. Anyway,
Wow.
hold on. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
Brian Adams says, do you think the Niners have enough cornerback depth, or should we look to free agency? Real quick, what do you think?
I don't think there is cornerback depth available in free agency.
That's a position to trade for, right? It's a position to trade for. Yeah. And we've talked
I agree with Brian. I would like some more cornerback depth. I think you're in the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think probably the way the Niners are going to do this is not get more cornerback depth. But if Jason Verrett were to go down, God forbid, then they could always make a trade. And there are guys on the block that we've mentioned. There are guys such as Stephon Gilmore, J.C. Jackson, others.
Yeah, I think Gilmore and Jackson are the two. I still prefer Gilmore to Jackson, even though the money with Jackson is better, because when Gilmore went out, one of the more underrated things when Jackson became their number one corner is that his production also slipped. Gilmore is truly still that elite player.
Wait, yeah. Last one, Curtis McLeod. Wait, hold up. Grant has more subscribers than Matt Mayoko's YouTube channel? Hold on, that's not Matt Mayoko's. That's NBC Sports Bay Area. And yeah, I do. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for noticing.
Let's go.